his call book. He'd go around the neighborhood to check in on the families. And it's a small book about that big, and we have it at the archives. And the Holland Society actually made a translation of it in 1916, which was published, which I'm sure is in the library here. We have copies of it as well. But again, another primary source of addresses, people, what was there, what was going on, a slice of that time in Amsterdam.
What is in Library A?
Library is a collection of documents. Of course, our first church records are there. Our first birth, marriage records, which started in 1639. Also letters. Tony Sellings would have copied some items into that. Maybe, I don't know where the original letters are, or they may not have been there, but he had copied in important documents relating to the church history and church operation at that time. And the book itself runs up to about 1700 with Tony's death. And then we have our next Library B, which will continue on to the Revolution. So it's a compendium. There are a couple of published hand sheets, which are some of the first printings in the United States. A lot of it's in Dutch, and I have to apologize that I do not know Dutch. So I'm happy that it's being translated. I mean, I've seen it, but now to see what it actually says is of great interest. So,
are there other artifacts beyond the published materials?
Yes, there's a list I had given you, and of course it's expanding now as we find we have indentures, we have letters,
the incorporation.
Yes, the charter, which actually, thank you, Chris. We are having our charter is currently out of our hands for one of its first and few times, is being conserved down in Philadelphia. So it's ongoing, and it's a good thing. We just wouldn't want to lose a real touchstone of our heritage. So that is being conserved, as well as a few other important documents. And this is hopefully starting a process where we're trying to maintain and really put out there what we have. Because I think after it's been conserved, it will be in a presentation format where it may be, or museum quality copies where it can be put out there for people to see it, to remember that you still buy it. So it is the oldest corporation charter in the country.
What's the relationship between the Collegiate Church Corporation and the Collegiate School?
Let me address that. In Collegiate School dates its founding to 1628, although about 10 years ago it was only to 1638. We went backward a bit. About 1940, they became separate corporations. We do have 5 directors out of the 27 directors at the Collegiate School. But although we occupy jointly between Collegiate School and West End, the building at 77th and West End Avenue, they are separate corporations and largely separate. We do interact between them. For example, our pastor teaches a course in freedom and nonviolence at Collegiate School, and Collegiate School ministers preach to our groups, and there is some interrelation, but it's not a formal one.
Today, but the original school itself, does that emanate?
Yes, the original school was part of the Collegiate Corporation up until about 1940.
Thank you very much.
I think that's just to say, I want to give you a couple of quick points to say that good things are coming out. And again, I'm getting some of the drafts as the rest of Casey and the rest of the corporate office, as we get it out there, the translations are happening, which is great because so many things were just listed. And again, there's another 10 documents that were on that they're finding. So it's nice to see that some things can still come out of a box of stuff that you just have on a shelf and say, what do we do with this? So that's all I have to just want
Thank
to
you so
add.
much. Appreciate it. Less still on that.
Well, I don't really have a whole lot to offer specifically about curriculum today, but I guess my role is less as a historian and more of play a support role in presenting history. But a few years ago, this was the New York State Grade 5 history exam. Now, probably it says, do not turn this page until you are told to do so. But since that was 2005, I think it's okay. But this test was given to every 5th grader in New York State on the same day. And my cousin is a school teacher, and she said, Len, they have your painting on the test. So this is a painting that I did about 25 years ago of Fort Orange. And this painting is in every history textbook in New York State in elementary school. So it's been published by a number of different publishers, and it's very rewarding to see that material show up in that way. And I think if I bring anything to the New Amsterdam History Center, it'll be a way of seeing the past. It's filtered through my imagination, but I try to make it as objective as possible. This is another little show and tell piece that I brought to give an idea of what the interest is in us here in New York. Of course, this is the front page of the newspaper that was published a week and a half ago in Holland. And Charlie's probably the only one here who can read it. But,
And the Oscar goes to...
yeah, and the Oscar goes to, okay, this is following the Academy Awards. But on the second page, they published the painting that I did of New York. And there's a whole story there about...
Dutch roots in America.
Yeah.
What does it say, Charlie?
Dutch paths or roots, basically, in America.
Yeah, and it's the stuff that that we keep talking about. It's how Dutch culture has impacted us all who live here in New York. So I'm going to just run through a few slides and give you a little bit of background just through the images. This is a painting that I did of a Mohican summer camp about 6 miles south of Albany. This image was made from archaeology that was done on that site by Karen Hartkin and Linda Lavin about, I think about 10 or 12 years ago. They discovered enough of this site to be able to put together a rough idea of the structures that were there, the number of people who were there. That's not the Hudson River, that little waterway. It's a creek. Our back is to the Hudson River. But there is a little crop of corn and beans and squash growing there.
And a scarecrow?
No, that's a warrior on his way to the. It's probably a little hard to see, but this is a painting of Fort Nassau in 1615. It was actually built in 1614. It only lasted 3 years, but this is the first documented European structure in New York State, and it was a little fort that was built on Castle Island near Albany. It was built by Hendrik Christensen. This is a painting that I did of Fort Orange in the background, Beverwyck in the background, and a ship called Gelderse Bloem, which was in part owned by Wouter van Twiller and brought supplies and colonists to Rensselaerswyck in the 1650s. There were very few of these large ships that came up the river, but we know of a few.